For 6 days, America searched for a missing pregnant mother and her 2 young daughters. Their names were Shanann Watts, 4-year-old Bella, and 3-year-old Celeste. When they disappeared from their home in Frederick, Colorado, the world wanted answers. Their family and friends hoped they would be found alive, and standing in front of television cameras was the man everyone expected to be searching the hardest, their husband and father, Christopher Watts. He looked like a heartbroken man. He spoke like someone desperate for his family to come home. He asked anyone with information to help bring them back. But investigators would soon discover something unimaginable. The man asking the world to find his missing family already knew exactly what had happened to them. Behind the smiling family photos was a hidden story of betrayal, secrets, and a decision that would destroy an entire family forever. This is the story of Chris Watts, the man who fooled America. Before we uncover the full timeline of this case, subscribe to the Crime Vault for more true crime documentaries exploring the evidence, the investigations, and the stories behind the headlines. Now, let's begin. August 13, 2018, began like any normal morning in Frederick, Colorado. A quiet neighborhood, ordinary homes, families starting another day. But inside one house on Saratoga Trail, something had happened that would leave an entire community searching for answers. Earlier that morning, Shanann Watts had returned home from a business trip. She was 34 years old, pregnant with her 3rd child, and looking forward to seeing her family. Waiting for her at home were her husband Chris and her 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. At the time, nobody knew this would be the last time Shanann would walk through her front door. Later that morning, Shanann's close friend Nicole Atkinson became worried. Shanann wasn't answering her phone. She was missing appointments. She wasn't responding to messages. For someone known to be organized and constantly connected, this was deeply unusual. Nicole knew her friend, and she knew Shanann would never disappear without telling someone. So she made a decision that would begin the investigation. She called the police. When officers arrived at the Watts home, they expected a missing persons case. What they found created more questions than answers. The house looked normal. There were no signs of forced entry, no obvious evidence of a struggle, but something felt wrong. Shanann's phone and belongings were still there, along with the kind of personal items someone would normally take if they were leaving on their own. The children's things were untouched. It looked less like a family had left, and more like something had interrupted their lives without warning. As the investigation gained attention, Chris Watts spoke publicly. Cameras captured him standing outside his home, looking into the lens, asking for his family to come back. To many viewers, he appeared to be a grieving husband and a worried father hoping for a miracle. But investigators were looking at something different. They were studying his words, his reactions, his body language. Because sometimes the truth isn't hidden in what someone says, it's hidden in what they leave out. While the world focused on finding Shanann and the girls, investigators uncovered a piece of evidence that would change the direction of the case entirely. Footage from a neighbor's security camera. What they saw raised new questions about Chris Watts. The investigation was no longer just about a missing family. It was becoming a search for the truth, and that truth was far darker than anyone imagined. Before the world knew the name Chris Watts, his family looked like the American dream in miniature. A husband, a wife, 2 little girls, and a 3rd child on the way. From the outside, they had everything. But the happiest photographs don't always tell the truth of what's happening just out of frame. Christopher Watts was quiet, reserved, easy to overlook in a room. Shanann was his opposite, confident and expressive, the kind of person who filled a space the moment she entered it. Together they built a family, Bella first, then Celeste, nicknamed Cece. By 2018, Shanann was pregnant again, this time with a boy they'd already named Nico. Online, Shanann shared all of it. The girls twirling in dresses, Chris carrying them on his shoulders, a family that looked, to thousands of followers, like it had figured something out. What none of them could see was what was happening underneath. Financial strain that had been building for months, and a marriage starting to buckle under the weight of it. By mid-2018, Shanann noticed her husband pulling away. shorter conversations, less affection, a distance she couldn't quite name. She responded the way many people do. She leaned in harder, trying to talk it through, believing this was a rough patch they'd get past together. What she didn't know was that Chris had already started building an exit. That summer, he began an affair with a coworker, not just infidelity, but the seed of an entire fantasy. A life without the pressure of his family, a fresh start built on someone else's absence rather than his own honesty. In the weeks that followed, Shanann kept fighting for a marriage she didn't realize was already over in her husband's mind. The world still saw a glowing, pregnant mother and a doting father, but the gap between that image and the truth inside their home was about to collapse into a tragedy that would leave one question hanging over everything that came after. How did nobody see it coming? To coworkers, Chris Watts was unremarkable, reliable, quiet, forgettable in the most harmless sense. To his daughters, he was still just dad. But by the summer of 2018, he was quietly living two lives, and the gap between them had grown wide enough to swallow his family whole. Shanann felt the shift before she understood it. Touch disappeared. Conversations shrank to logistics. She responded by trying harder, asking questions, initiating conversations, convinced that naming the problem was the first step to fixing it. She believed, as many partners do, that this was simply a hard season to get through. Chris had already stopped trying to get through it with her. Investigators would later trace the affair he began that summer back to its origin, a relationship that gave him somewhere to retreat into, a fantasy of starting over completely rather than doing the harder work of honesty. In the weeks before the murders, that fantasy started showing on the surface. Small changes to his appearance and habits, a growing self-focus, a father and husband who was, in every meaningful sense, already gone before he ever said a word. Shanann had no visibility into any of it. 34 weeks pregnant, she spent her final days preparing a nursery, managing 2 toddlers, and holding on to a marriage she had no idea was already over in her husband's mind. On August 12th, she flew home from a trip to Arizona. A neighbor's camera caught her car pulling into the driveway late that night, an unremarkable clip that would later be identified as the last time Shanann Watts was ever seen alive. Investigators would spend months afterward trying to pinpoint the exact moment Chris crossed from a man drifting away to a man capable of what came next. The answer wouldn't fully take shape until the following morning, August 13th, 2018, a day that began like any other and ended with an entire family gone. Monday, August 13th, began the way most Mondays do in Frederick, Colorado. Sprinklers clicking on, garage doors rolling open, nothing suggesting this quiet suburb was about to become the center of a national tragedy. Shanann had arrived home in the early hours of that morning, dropped off by her friend Nicole Atkinson after a red-eye flight from Arizona. 34 weeks pregnant and exhausted from travel, she walked into her house around 2 in the morning. No one outside that house would see her alive again. Chris left for work later that morning, behaving, by every account, like a normal if slightly tired father. But back at the house, Shanann had missed a mandatory pregnancy appointment and gone silent. No messages, no location updates, nothing. For Nicole, who knew her friend's habits intimately, the silence didn't add up. She reached out to Chris directly. His answers felt vague and unconvincing. Trusting her instincts, she called for a welfare check. When police arrived, the house told a strange story. Nothing looked disturbed. Wallets, medications, the girls' toys, all untouched, all exactly where a family still living there would leave them. It didn't look like anyone had left. It looked like they should still be home. A neighbor's security footage offered the first real evidence. Chris moving around outside in the early morning hours. Innocuous at first glance, until investigators compared it against his own account and found the details didn't quite line up. At first, Chris played the role expected of him, the distraught husband, pleading publicly for his family's return. But detectives are trained to watch for more than words, and the more he talked, the more his story shifted with each retelling. Quietly, the investigation's focus began to change. No longer just where is Shanann, but what does Chris know? By the end of that day, what had started as a missing persons case was already, behind closed doors, becoming something far darker. As search parties combed fields and news vans lined Saratoga Trail, detectives were quietly building a case that no longer centered on finding a missing family, but on the man who claimed to be searching for them, just as desperately as everyone else. They laid Chris's timeline against phone records, GPS data, and neighborhood footage. The gaps between his account and the evidence kept widening. He was pressed on his marriage, on the morning Shanann disappeared, on what happened inside that house, and he continued insisting he didn't know where his family was. Chris agreed to a polygraph. The results gave investigators enough confidence to tell him directly they didn't believe him, a turning point that either breaks a suspect's composure or hardens it further. For Chris, it was the beginning of the end of his story. Under continued pressure, his account began to shift, and at one point, he tried to redirect blame onto Shanann, describing a fight that conveniently left him at the edges of the tragedy. Investigators didn't accept it. The physical evidence didn't support it. Eventually, the story collapsed entirely. Chris Watts admitted he had killed his wife. The case instantly became a murder investigation, but Shanann, Bella, and Celeste still hadn't been found. That search led investigators to the oil worksite where Chris worked, an unremarkable industrial property that by the end of that day would confirm the worst fears of everyone who loved them. When the news broke, the reaction went far beyond Frederick, Colorado. People who had followed Shanann online for years, who'd watched Bella twirl in dresses and Celeste's toddler grin light up countless videos, were left reconciling the wholesome family they thought they knew with a truth that upended everything. Investigators had their confession, their timeline, their evidence. What they didn't have, what no one would have for a long time, was an answer to the deeper question: what could drive a husband and father to destroy the very family he'd spent years presenting to the world as his greatest joy? With Shanann, Bella, and Celeste recovered, the story moved from search to reckoning. For the millions following online, this was the moment uncertainty turned to grief. For Shanann's family, the pain hadn't waited for a confession. It had lived in them since the search began, and it would remain long after the story left the headlines. Chris Watts was charged with multiple counts tied to the deaths of his wife and daughters, plus an additional charge for the unborn son, Nico, Shanann had been carrying. The case drew scrutiny worldwide, as people tried to square the devoted father they'd seen online with the man investigators had uncovered. Chris ultimately pleaded guilty to all charges, avoiding a lengthy trial, taking the death penalty off the table, and sparing Shanann's family a prolonged public airing of every detail. In November 2018, a Colorado judge sentenced him to multiple consecutive life sentences without parole, calling the crimes among the most disturbing the court had seen. Shanann's family spoke directly at the hearing, their words carrying a weight no legal document could hold. But no sentence, however severe, could return what had been taken. It's easy, in true crime, for the person who committed the crime to dominate the story. This one deserves better. Shanann was a wife, a mother, a daughter, a woman who built a career helping others while quietly managing exhaustion and morning sickness, just out of frame of her own camera. Bella was a spirited 4-year-old who loved dancing through her living room. Celeste, not yet 2, was still learning the shape of the world. They weren't details in an investigation. They were a family with a future that was taken from them. What still unsettles people about this case isn't only the violence, it's the distance between appearance and reality that let it happen unnoticed. A smiling photo, a sweet video, a perfect family moment. None of it guarantees the whole truth. People still ask when exactly Chris decided his family no longer belonged in his future, whether the warning signs were visible to anyone paying close attention, how a person separates that completely from those who trust him most. Those questions may never fully resolve. What remains certain is that Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were real people whose lives mattered far beyond the tragedy that ended them, and that their story endures not because of the man who took their lives, but because of the lives they lived. If this case affected you the way it's affected millions of others, consider subscribing to the Crime Vault for more true crime deep dives that go beyond the headlines. We look past the news cycle into the timelines, the evidence, and the questions that never fully get answered. Let us know in the comments, what part of the Chris Watts case surprised you the most? Thank you for watching, and remember, every case has a story, every victim has a voice, and the truth is always waiting to be uncovered.